The first one's, oh, maybe this isn't, maybe that's the issue. This is average monthly expenses, so this is tracking our expenses. This is what we kind of talked about before. Is this chapter 8?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
We
we,
did chapter 8 already?
yeah. Yeah, we're on chapter 9.
Hey, let me check my notes.
I say we do chapter 8, yeah.
No.
Yeah, let's do it. Yes, we are on the chapter.
Yeah, here we go.
My notes is chapter 8.
So this is what I was talking about. Us running your own business. So those of you that kind of have that in the back of your mind, this is what we're going to have to talk about. You're going to have a prime cost, so this is again big time vocabulary stuff to know what you are going to, basically have to figure out. So again, when you start doing these problems in this chapter, you got to really kind of focus into seeing. They're going to be talking about, obviously, if you own your own business, you're going to have some materials. So let's say Justice runs his own construction company. Well, he would have to have all that construction stuff on site, right? But he still has to have a company to buy it from. So that's sometimes where the confusion comes in. Are we talking in the perspective of Justice, or are we talking into his business that he's buying from in Carter? You know what I'm saying? So just kind of be careful when we're talking about this. Obviously, we want to control costs, and probably more than ever, this is a huge thing right now. I just was down at my sister's this weekend, and her husband has not gone back to work. He's a weird computer guy that sets up like systems for people. And he used to go into a building, and now they totally eliminated that building. And I asked him straight up, do you think you'll ever go back? And he said no. His companies are originally out of New York. So it was not like the company was, even in Omaha where he was at. But with computer stuff, he can just, basically set it up and then set it back to him anyway. And now he does it all from his basement. So he honestly said that he would probably never go back. And I said, did that bother you? And obviously, one of the big things is, and a lot of your parents probably found this out with Wells, is the not being able to see people and that kind of thing. So honestly, he sits in front of like 3 computers and does computer stuff for 8 hours a day in the basement and never gets to see anybody. So, but that's a huge deal right now, right? If I'm owning a company, we found out that we don't need the company. We need the company name, but we don't need that building. And eliminating that building is eliminating a lot of cost, right? Because I don't have to heat it, I don't have to blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that's a lot of things. So when we start talking about this, we're going to talk about 3 different categories. Raw materials. Raw materials are materials you have to manufacture, whatever it is whatever you do. So these materials become or are part of your finished product. So again, this is what I was talking about for Justice. If he's a construction guy, he would need, but he's going to have to get his wood or whatever from somebody else first. Okay, but he needs to have someplace to have it. Then we have 2 different kinds, or we have direct labor costs. This would be wages for the workers that directly work for you. All right? Working on the product. So like when we're talking about Wells again, we go back to Wells, we're talking about the people that are on the line putting the ice creams together and the cones together and all that kind of stuff. All right? These costs are separated into each specific product. So you can tell exactly what it costs per year, per portion. So if we go to Wells and we break it down to Adrian runs this group of people, Tiff runs this group of people, Molly and Carter, they would each have a specific responsibility for whatever we're talking about. So if we're building ice cream cones or something, maybe Adrian's in charge of the packaging. Tiff's in charge of the cone part. Molly's in charge of getting the ice cream there. Carter's in charge of setting it up and having delivery. Okay? if all of a sudden there's 20 crates lined up in the freezer, we know that Carter forgot to call the trekking company, right? Or all of a sudden the ice cream cone's ready to go, or it wouldn't be necessarily an ice cream cone, but you know what I'm saying, the drumstick's ready to go to service, and Adrian forgot to call the packaging company, so they have no packages. Or they can't keep up because they're short of people stuffing them into the package. So we would know that by the production. And so then, obviously, we could figure out if somebody's not really keeping up with their portion of the trade. And then last but not least, the factory overhead. These are expenses that you have for business, but it's not directly related to your product. So this would be, when we were talking just a little bit ago about my brother-in-law's job, this would be the one that we would be basically throwing out, right? So factory overhead, wages for supervisors and managers, we would still have to have those probably. We'd still have to have that person checking in on each of our divisions, okay? But we could eliminate this next one hardcore, right? Building rent, electricity, depreciation of equipment, insurance, basic supplies. You think about all the basic supplies that if we then switch and talk about school, okay? What do the teachers need? Well, you think about electricity. Our building's probably not overly big compared to other schools. You think about the electricity costs from here compared to community. It'd be phenomenal, right? And how much, to me, we waste electricity all the time around here. You come in here on a Saturday morning and there's lights on everywhere. Why, right? Those little things get left on. You know, we're still running the heater. Obviously, we have to run the heat somewhat, but it's not real easy for us to go around and change the heat all down to 65 degrees because of some of them are manual, some of them are, you know, we just have an older building. So again, that's where, yeah, do we have the money to upgrade? Probably not, but is an upgrade worth it by going in debt for a little bit? Maybe, maybe not, you know? Can we catch up to that? Okay, so they're going to ask you to find different costs. The first one is the prime cost. The prime cost is taking your raw materials and your direct labor and adding them together. Okay? The prime cost then goes to the total manufacturing cost, and that's just then including your factory overhead. So again, when they talk about the prime cost, we're adding up these two right here. When we're talking about the total manufacturing cost, we're including all three of them. So that's a big thing, or a big deal. Okay? We'll come back and look at an example of that in just a little bit. Then they talk about distributing the factory overhead. This would be, again, so your basic costs, maybe this would be about, if we had to rent a building, and each of you, as your subdivisions, had a portion of that building, we would divvy up the amount that your section was responsible for, in a sense, by the space that you needed. So realistically, Carter probably doesn't need a whole lot of space if he's in transportation because it's all going to get shipped or it's all going to be put onto a truck or something. So they just need a cubicle each or something so they can make those calls, and you know, it's a little different than you other people that are actually on the line. So you got to think about all that spacing. And so then you would decide, well, do we have enough space? Do we need more space? Is Adrian's group taking up too much space? Can we divvy that one up? Can we break it up a little bit and disperse it amongst everybody else? And so you're going to figure out how much space you have and then divvy it up between how much either like Tiff's group would put forth, meaning are they putting in a lot of the energy of making our money? Maybe they get more space. Maybe they get more materials. Maybe they have to pay for more, you know? So you're going to disperse it by necessity in a sense. Okay, so those things would be something about maintenance, or something about supplies, or something with that thought process. Maintenance meaning, okay, is it the cleaning crew? Is it, just fixing certain things? Obviously, again, Carter's division, if he's in transportation, they probably don't have to fix a whole lot unless he's actually the company has their own trucks and stuff. And maybe it's a huge part of maintenance, okay? Tiff's group was they needed 2 big machines. Well, then her maintenance bill or budget would be a lot more than others. Okay, so that's what we're going to take into consideration. All right? So let's look at a couple of examples. Turn to page 300 and looks like about 80. Nope, a little more than that. 383, thank you. So, page 383, letter A. The records of a bicycle factory show these costs for goods produced in the first quarter. Raw materials of $861,000, direct labor of $1.9 million, and factory overhead of $387,000. What was the prime cost of the goods produced during the quarter? What was the total manufacturing? So again, when they say prime cost, which 2 things are we adding up? The first two, basically, right? So basically, roughly 2.7 million, 2.8 million. And then when they ask the manufacturing cost, then we include that last number. What's that?
What's factory overhead?
So the factory overhead was how much we were spending on. Right here. So those are the things that you have to pay for: the rent, the electricity. Those are expenses you're going to have. That's where a lot of people are figuring out. We're going to try to throw that out. So you think about right there, if they could get rid of $300,000 or almost $400,000, that's a great thing for business. You know what I'm saying? So B's just a little different. To make 150 telephones, Comtech had these manufacturing costs. Materials were $1,200, labor was $1,900, and factory overhead was $1,200. What was the prime cost of making the telephones? So again, prime cost, we're going to add which 2? So the first 2, and then it says what was the total manufacturing cost of each phone. So in the second part, we're going to add in that third number, but then we have to take all of that grand total and do what to it? Divide by 150. Perfect. And then on average, it says to the nearest whole cent. Whole cent would mean 2 decimal places. So which number are we looking at? The third one. Okay, turn the page. So here's the example of trying to figure out who gets to pay for what. Letter C. The 4 divisions of Panasol Electronics use this floor space. The printers division uses 6,000, scanners uses 2,800. Copiers use 5,000, and faxes are 2,200 square feet. The yearly maintenance cost of the building is $28,000, and it's distributed based on the floor space of each division. How much is each division charged annually? So, what the heck do we do?
Each one divided by the 28,000.
Why? Okay, so both of you are Derek, you're on the right track, but you got to do what Donovan said. So I'm going to take, what were the 4 numbers again?
6,000.
What?
2,800. 5,000. And then 2,200.
So I'm going to take this right here, and
16,000.
this is 16,000, you said? Okay, so I'm going to take 16,000, and we're going to then divide it by what? 28,000. What's the 28,000?
Your average cost.
Okay. Hold up. That's not
That's
right.
the maintenance cost.
So 16,000 is what?
That's
This is my total square footage, right? So I want to know what each division is a part of this. Okay, so I'm going to take 6,000 and I'm going to divide it by the total number of square footage. And it should be a decimal or a percentage. Okay, so this is the percentage. So this division, again, is what percent of my grand total of space? That's what they're asking.
So then you take that.
So if you punch this in down, what do you get here?
37.5%.
Okay, so 0.375.
So
So then I'm going to take this decimal and multiply this by my total amount of, what was it, maintenance or electricity or whatever it happens to be. My total bill. Okay? If I take 0.375 times 28,000, how much is that, Don?
10,500.
So my first division, which was what? Printers, I think?
Do a scanner.
The printers are in charge of $10,500 of that bill. Okay? So again, each of these is the amount of space. So each of those will have to be taken. So the next one I'm going to do is 2,800 divided by 16,000. 16,000 in this case will always be in the denominator. So this is always going to be the total amount of space. Okay? And then that decimal will always be multiplied. Here's where the difference is. Don't subtract these. Always come back to this 28,000. That makes sense what we're saying? I'm a little confused there.
So what's the point of knowing all this?
So,
No.
I'm gonna have a budget, basically. So we're gonna say, because, what was this, printers?
Yeah.
So if I'm in charge of the printers, I would have to know that I need at least $10,500 in my budget because I have to pay for maintenance or whatever it was. And then I would have another category and another category, and that would be my whole budget that I would be allowed to spend. So then if I needed more people, then I would have to adjust my budget somehow. That makes sense what I'm saying? And so then the other thing would be, okay, so we would go through and say, well, we looked back at last year and they're taking up the most space. But maybe they didn't do the most productivity. So are we wasting our money giving them all that space when they're not bringing in that productivity? So then we might divvy it up and maybe they flip-flop and come down to whatever that portion of the building is. Okay? So again, the most important thing is to add them all up and find that grand total of whatever you're talking about first. And then each one of those have to be divided and get a decimal like you did in the first one, and then multiply that by your total bill. So essentially, we would have to do this multiple times depending on what we're divvying up the bills into. Maybe there is 14 different things, and then we'd have to do that 14 different times and then find a grand total at the end for each of my 4 sections. Okay? That make sense?